The twin suns of Varine 4 burned low on the horizon, painting the sky with gold and violet. The wind carried dust from the empty plains, brushing against the quiet shelters scattered near the edge of the old mining zone. Among them stood a small outpost once built for trade, now home to one man who no longer waited for anyone. His name was Elias Grant, a human engineer who had come to this world 5 years ago and stayed after everyone else left. Machines rusted, signals faded, and silence became his only company. He had grown used to it, until that day. It began with a sound he had not heard in months, a knock on the airlock door. Soft, hesitant, like someone unsure they deserved to be there, Elias almost thought it was a trick of the wind. But then the knock came again, weaker this time. He walked to the entry, his boots echoing in the metal hall, and opened the outer gate. What he saw made him freeze. A woman stood there, her silver-gray skin coated in dust, her long hair tangled and dull. Her eyes glowed faintly blue like biolight from the deep caves of her people. She looked exhausted, trembling, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Around her neck hung a small pendant of woven crystal, a symbol Elias remembered from the nearby alien colony. She was not human. She was Kirani, one of the Lysari, a species known for their strength and their pride. But the woman before him looked broken, desperate, and lost. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. She looked at him, eyes wide and pleading, then whispered a few words in broken English. I seek— Bondmate, please. Elias stared, not understanding at first. The Lysari bonded for life. For one to ask this meant more than companionship. It was a vow to share breath, food, and soul. He had read about it once in a forgotten report. They only chose when they had nowhere else to go. He took a slow step toward her. Hey, he said softly, you don't need to do that. You need rest. Come inside. Her gaze lifted to his, uncertain, afraid he might send her away. When he opened the door wider, she hesitated, then stepped inside. The moment the warm air touched her, she shivered as if she had been holding herself together for too long. Elias guided her to a seat near the heater. He handed her water, and she drank it like someone who hadn't had any in days. Her hands trembled the whole time. He didn't ask questions right away. He just let her breathe. He noticed faint scars on her arms, the dullness in her eyes that spoke of something deeper than pain. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small but steady. My people, gone, ship lost. I walked far. No one left. I choose you. Human heart. Strong. Elias felt something shift inside him. It wasn't pity, it was respect. She had crossed the wild plains of Varine 4 alone, surviving where even machines failed. To come to a stranger's door and ask for connection took more courage than most could imagine. But he also knew what her words meant. If he accepted, their lives would be tied. If he refused, she would have no tribe, no right to remain among any colony. He had seen enough loneliness to recognize it in others. You don't have to decide that now, he said gently. Stay, eat something. We can talk later. But Kirani shook her head, her silver hair catching the light. I already decided, she said. You have kindness. Kindness means strength. My people forgot that. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind howled across the empty land, brushing against the metal walls like a whisper of the past. Elias sat beside her, trying to make sense of what destiny had just brought to his door.
He had come to Varine 4 to escape the noise of the universe, to live quietly with machines that did not speak.
Yet here sat a woman who carried the last breath of her kind, and she had chosen him. He made her soup from what little he had. She watched him work, her eyes softening. When he placed the bowl before her, she bowed her head slightly, a Lysari gesture of gratitude. She ate slowly, as though every bite reminded her she was still alive. Elias watched in silence, feeling a strange warmth fill the small room. Later, when she grew tired, he offered her his cot. She looked at him unsure. You sleep where? She asked. I'll take the chair, he said. Don't worry about me. She seemed to study him for a moment, as if measuring the shape of his soul, then nodded. As she lay down, she whispered something in her native tongue. He didn't understand, but the tone carried peace. Within minutes, she was asleep. Elias sat there for a long time, listening to the wind outside and the soft breathing of the alien woman in his bed. The outpost felt different now, no longer silent, no longer lifeless. Somewhere deep inside him, something long asleep began to stir again. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was purpose. Maybe it was the quiet truth that no being, human or Lisseri, was meant to face the stars alone. Outside, dawn rose again over the twin suns. Inside, a new bond, fragile, uncertain, but real, had begun to form. The next morning, light from the twin suns spilled through the small window, turning the walls of the outpost into a soft gold color. Elias woke to the faint sound of movement. Kirani was already awake, standing near the table, quietly studying one of his broken drones. Her silver hair glowed faintly in the sunlight, and her expression was calm but curious. She looked stronger than the night before, though her eyes still carried sadness. When Elias spoke, his voice was gentle. "You slept well?" She looked at him and nodded slowly. "Warm, safe, I forgot how that feels." Elias smiled, though it was a tired smile. "Then you can stay here until you want to move on." Her head tilted slightly. "You still think I will leave?" He hesitated. "You said you wanted to bond with me. I thought maybe you only said that because you were alone." Kirani's eyes met his, and for a moment the silence between them grew deep. "Among my people," she said softly, "we do not speak bond without truth. I saw something in you. You fix broken things, even when no one asks you to. That is rare." Elias looked away, unsure what to say. Her words touched something in him he didn't often show. Loneliness. He had fixed machines for years, but never hearts. He didn't know if he could fix hers or his own. But something about her calm voice made him want to try. As the day passed, she followed him around the outpost. She watched how he repaired old solar panels, checked the water filters, and fed the few small plants that survived in metal trays. Every so often, she offered quiet help. Her hands were steady, skilled, almost delicate. She learned quickly, copying his movements. By midday, they worked together in easy silence. When they took a break, she asked, "Why you stay here?" "No others, no sound but wind." Elias shrugged. "Maybe because it's quiet. Maybe because I got tired of people." She looked at him, eyes curious. "Tired of people? Humans have so many. Why be alone?" He gave a small laugh. "Sometimes too many people means no peace. Out here, no one lies. The world just is what it is." Kirani thought for a while before answering. "Peace is not silence. It is being seen." Her words were simple, but they stayed with him. That evening, they shared another meal. Elias showed her the old communication terminal he kept for checking signals. It hadn't worked for months, but he still turned it on from time to time, hoping to hear something. As they sat beside it, a faint static sound filled the room. Then, for the first time in a long while, a weak signal blinked to life. Kirani leaned closer. "Someone calling?" she asked. Elias adjusted the controls, frowning. "Could be a ship. Could be just interference." Kirani's eyes lit up faintly with hope. "Maybe my people?" He looked at her and said softly, "If it is, you can go back." Her smile faded. "And leave you?" He paused. "You don't owe me anything." Kirani reached out, touching the metal of the console, not his hand, but close enough for him to feel her warmth. "Among my kind," she whispered, "choice is the only gift. I chose you." The signal faded soon after, leaving only quiet again. Elias stared at the dark screen, feeling strange. Part of him wished the signal had been clear. Another part felt a quiet relief. He didn't want her to go, not yet. Over the next few days, their routine became natural. They fixed things together, ate together, sometimes talked about small things, the colors of the stars, the taste of earth fruits she had once tried, the scent of the Lazari gardens she missed. Kirani began to hum while she worked, a soft melody that filled the outpost like light through dusty glass. It made the place feel alive again. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains. Lightning danced far away, and the wind howled like a lonely creature. Elias went outside to secure the panels, and Kirani followed him. The storm wind tore at their clothes, and she steadied one of the cables beside him. When it was done, they stood under the faint rain, faces turned toward the alien sky. For a moment she laughed, quiet, surprised laughter. It was the first time he had heard it. "You laugh," Elias said. "That's a good sound." She smiled, her glowing eyes soft. "You make me remember what living feels like." They went inside, dripping with rain and dust, and Kirani suddenly grew quiet again. She looked at him long, her expression tender and unsure. "In my world, when two share shelter during storm, it means their spirits walk same path." Elias swallowed, his throat tight. "Is that what we're doing?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, you gave me warmth when I had nothing." I will give you purpose when you feel empty. This is how bond begins. He didn't know how to answer. All he could do was meet her gaze, and in her calm eyes he saw something new. Trust. Not the fragile trust of a lost traveler, but the quiet, steady trust of someone choosing to stay. That night she slept again in his cot, and he sat near the heater watching the small flame flicker. He thought about her words, about what it meant to be chosen by someone not out of need but out of faith. He realized then that he had stopped thinking of her as a guest. She had become something else, a part of the place, a part of his quiet world. Outside, the storm passed. Inside, two beings from distant worlds began to build a small peace, one act of kindness at a time. Days passed quietly on the edge of the empty plains. The outpost, once filled with only the hum of old machines, now carried a softer rhythm. Elias worked in the mornings, checking the energy cells, cleaning filters, repairing what time had worn down. Kehrani helped him with patience and quiet skill. She no longer trembled when she spoke. Her voice had grown steady again, filled with calm strength. She began to walk outside the base at sunrise, her bare feet pressing into the red dust. Elias watched her sometimes from the doorway. She would stand still for long moments, her eyes closed, breathing the air as if greeting the planet itself. When she came back, she always brought something, a crystal fragment, a small plant, a handful of dust that shimmered faintly in light. She said they were signs that life still remembers. One morning, Elias found her sketching on a piece of metal with a small tool. The lines formed shapes, circles within circles joined by fine threads. "What's that?" he asked. She smiled softly. "A memory map. Every Lasari makes one. It shows the path of our soul." He looked closer. "And this one?" She tapped a small circle near the center. "That is you." The words caught him off guard. "Me?" She nodded, not shy. "You changed my map. When one heart saves another, the path moves. It means I am not lost anymore." Elias didn't know what to say. For so long he had fixed broken wires, not lives. To think he had changed someone's path, it humbled him. That evening they shared tea by the heater. The small light flickered against the metal walls. Kehrani asked softly, "Why did you stop building ships?" He leaned back, eyes distant. "I used to work on colonies, big ones. Then the funding stopped, people left, and I stayed. Maybe I stayed because I was tired of watching things fall apart." She tilted her head. "Things fall apart, yes. But you build again. That is what humans do. You never stop." Her words were simple, but something in her tone made them powerful. Elias looked at her, realizing that maybe humanity's greatest strength was not in its machines, but in its heart, the will to rebuild even after loss. Later that night, a soft sound broke the stillness, a faint pulse from the old communication console. Elias frowned and went to check. The signal was stronger this time, a rhythmic pattern repeating every few seconds. Kehrani came closer, listening. "Not random," she said quietly. "That is a call." Elias adjusted the controls. "Could be one of the mining relays." Kehrani shook her head. "No, that's from orbit. The pattern means search and reclaim." The words made Elias pause. "Search and reclaim? You mean—" "Yes," she said. "It means someone looking for survivors. Or lost property." The signal blinked again, stronger now. Kehrani's expression grew distant. "If they find me, they will take me back." Elias turned to her. "But isn't that what you wanted? To go home?" She met his gaze with quiet sadness. "There is no home, only laws. They will not understand why I chose you. They will not see bond. They will see mistake." Elias followed her gaze. It was faint but real, a vessel moving in slow orbit. The signal from the console began to blink again. Kehrani lowered her head, her long hair falling forward. "They found me." Elias stood still, unsure what to do. She turned to him with a calm, sad smile. "If they come, they will ask why I live with you, why I call you bond. They will not accept it. But I will not hide truth." He took a deep breath. "You don't have to face them alone." Her eyes softened. "No, Elias, you do not face storms alone either. We face together." That night, neither of them slept. They sat near the window, watching the faint glow in the sky grow brighter. The hum of the ship's engines reached them through the thin air. Kehrani placed her hand gently over his. Her skin was cool, yet it carried warmth through the touch. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "my choice stays. My path changed because of you." Elias squeezed her hand, his voice quiet. "Then we'll find a way." Humans always do. Outside, the stars shifted as the silver light descended slowly through the clouds. Inside, two souls from distant worlds waited, not with fear, but with quiet courage. The bond between them, fragile but real, held steady against the vast silence of the universe. The next morning came with a strange quiet. The twin suns rose, but the air felt heavy as if the world itself was waiting. Elias stood outside the outpost, looking toward the distant horizon. In the far sky, the silver glow was still there, closer now. A ship, smooth and bright, shaped like a crescent, hovered beyond the plains. It moved slowly, almost silently. Kairani joined him, her long silver hair moving gently in the morning wind. Her glowing eyes looked at the ship without fear but with sadness. "They came," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Looks like they found your signal." She turned to him. "You think they will take me?" He didn't know how to answer. "I think they'll want to talk first." All day they waited. The ship stayed above the plains, motionless like a star that refused to leave. Kairani spent the time cleaning the small space inside, as if she wanted it to look peaceful. She placed her memory map near the heater and lit a small glow crystal beside it. Elias helped her, though his heart was restless. By evening, the air shimmered. A low hum filled the valley, and a soft light touched the outpost door. Kairani looked up, calm. "They come now." When the outer hatch opened, Elias saw 3 Lissari figures standing there. They were tall, elegant, their skin glowing faintly with the same silver tone as Kairani's. Their clothes shimmered like woven glass, and their faces were calm but distant, as if carved from moonlight. One of them stepped forward, a male, his voice deep and steady. "Kairani of the 9th line," he said. "We followed your beacon. You were marked lost." She bowed her head slightly. "I was, but I am found." The Lissari man's eyes shifted to Elias. "You live among a human." His tone held no anger, only surprise. Kairani stepped between them. "He saved my life when no one else would. He gave me food, shelter, and warmth." The man looked at Elias again. "Humans are known for their survival. But bond with one? That is not the way of our kind." Elias stood quiet, unsure what to say. He didn't want to cause trouble, but he also wouldn't deny her truth. "She came here hurt," he said softly. "I only did what anyone should." The Lissari looked at him for a long moment. "Few would act without reward." Kairani lifted her chin. "He asked for nothing. That is why I chose him." The 3 visitors exchanged glances. The one beside the leader, a woman with pale violet eyes, spoke gently. "Kairani, do you understand what you are saying? The bond is sacred. It ties the soul. No Lissari has ever joined with a human." "I understand," Kairani said, "but bond is not about form. It is about truth. His heart is strong, his spirit kind. He gave me reason to live again." The leader sighed, his voice softer now. "Your path is your own, but our people will not understand this. You cannot return with us if you stay bound to him." Kairani's voice did not tremble. "Then I do not return." The silence that followed was deep. The Lissari woman looked at her with sadness. "You would give up your lineage, your place for this human?" Kairani turned to Elias. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, unsure if he should ask her to stay or tell her to go. She smiled faintly, as if reading his thoughts. "My place is where I am seen. Here I am seen." The leader closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "Then your choice stands. The council will not accept it, but neither will we undo it. May your path be your own." He turned to Elias, his expression unreadable. "Human, you have changed what we thought we knew. Take care of her, for her spirit carries light." Elias gave a small nod. "I will." The Lissari bowed slightly, then stepped back. Their bodies shimmered, dissolving into soft light before reappearing near the ship. Within moments, the vessel lifted quietly and disappeared into the high clouds, leaving behind silence once more. Kairani stood still for a long time, watching the empty sky. Then she sighed, a slow, deep sound. "It is done." Elias stepped closer. "You really gave up everything for this?" She turned to him, her eyes shining softly. "Not everything. I kept what matters." He didn't know what to say. The quiet between them wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. She smiled faintly, reaching out to touch the metal wall of the outpost. "This place, these small things you build, it is life. I want to build with you." That evening, they worked together, fixing the old power cables that had burned during the storm. Kairani hummed while she worked, her melody calm and low. Elias felt the sound settle into the walls, into the air, into him. When the stars appeared, they sat outside, watching the twin moons rise. Karani leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. "Now we begin again," she whispered. Elias looked at the sky where the ship had vanished. "Seems like the universe always tries to pull things apart," he said softly. "But sometimes it brings the right ones together first." Karani smiled, her voice barely above the wind. "That is what humans teach the stars, to never stop trying." The night grew cooler. The outpost lights glowed faintly, marking a small dot of life in the endless desert. Far above, unseen by either of them, distant sensors watched and recorded, carrying a quiet story back into space of a woman who chose hope, and a man who gave it shape. The world turned slowly under the twin suns, and for the first time in a long time, neither Elias nor Karani felt alone. Weeks passed after the Lyseri ship left the skies of Varine 4. The plains were silent again, but the silence no longer felt empty. Inside the small outpost, life had begun to grow in quiet ways. Elias repaired more machines. Karani tended to small plants that began to bloom under her care. The dull metal walls now held soft colors of cloth she had woven from old fibers. The place no longer looked abandoned. It looked like home. Each morning, Karani stood outside watching the suns rise. She said the light here was different from any she had known. "On my world," she told Elias, "the sky glows blue and white. But here it feels like the suns are alive. They do not just shine, they forgive." Elias smiled. "Maybe they know we need it." They worked together each day, side by side, learning from each other. Karani's touch healed broken circuits in ways Elias couldn't explain. She said her people felt the energy of matter like sound, and she could sense where it was wrong. Elias showed her how to rebuild old engines, how to balance power, how to make machines hum again. Their two ways, hers of feeling and his of building, began to blend into something new. One day, while testing a repaired beacon, Elias noticed something unexpected. The signal reached far, far beyond what it should. "That's odd," he muttered. "This range is stronger than before." Karani leaned over the console. "It listens too well," she said softly. "It will be heard?" Elias laughed lightly. "Maybe that's not bad. Maybe someone will pick it up and know we're still here." A week later, someone did. Late one evening, while they shared tea, a faint light blinked on the console. Elias checked it and his expression changed. "It's a transmission," he said. "Human channel. From orbit." Karani's eyes widened. "Humans come here too?" "Sometimes traders," he said. "But this is from a deep relay. It says they detected an active outpost on the old mining grid." "That's us," she looked at him quietly. "Will they come?" He hesitated. "Maybe. They'll be curious." 3 days later, the answer arrived in the sky. A human transport ship descending with a soft roar of engines. Dust swirled across the plains as it landed near the ridge. Elias stood outside, shielding his eyes from the light. Karani stood beside him, calm but alert. When the hatch opened, 3 humans stepped out, 2 men and 1 woman in light gear, wearing badges of the Colonial Survey. The woman smiled as she approached. "We thought this sector was empty," she said. "Didn't expect to find anyone alive here." Elias grinned faintly. "Guess we're harder to get rid of than they thought." Her gaze shifted to Karani, curiosity flickering across her face. "You're Lysari, right? We haven't seen your kind on the frontier in years." Karani nodded politely. "I live here now." The woman tilted her head. "Together?" Elias nodded, steady. "Yes, she's my partner." There was a moment of surprise among the survey team, but no one spoke against it. The woman smiled again. "Well, that's a first for the records. But who am I to question how people survive out here?" The team stayed for 2 days to inspect the old mining network. During that time, they watched how Elias and Karani worked together. The humans were quietly impressed. Karani's ability to read energy fields made their sensors more efficient. The team leader even said, "If we had someone like her in engineering, we'd save half our power costs." But what surprised them most wasn't her skill. It was how the two of them moved together. They didn't need to speak much. A small glance, a hand gesture, and they understood each other completely. There was no command, no divide, no fear. It was harmony. On the last night before departure, one of the crew sat with Elias beside the heater. "You know," he said, "word about you two will travel fast. Earth Command will want to know how this happened." Elias shrugged. "Let them ask. We didn't plan it. We just helped each other stay alive." Kirani looked up from across the room, smiling faintly. Life chooses strange paths, she said softly. Maybe the stars are learning from us. The next morning the ship lifted off, leaving behind dust and quiet once again. But now the quiet carried something new, a sense of beginning. A few days later the relay console flashed again. A message from the human ship appeared. Survey report logged. Outpost 12 operational. Human engineer cohabiting with Lissari survivor. Harmony confirmed. Request to classify zone as cooperative habitat. Elias read the words slowly. Cooperative habitat, he murmured. They're making it official. Kirani smiled, her eyes glowing with warmth. So the universe watches, and instead of judgment, it learns. In the following weeks, more ships came, not to take, but to understand. Human engineers, alien envoys, quiet observers, all drawn by the strange little outpost where two beings had chosen peace over fear. They brought supplies, seeds, and tools. They built greenhouses. They asked questions. They listened. And through it all, Elias and Kirani remained the same, working, laughing, building together. Their story spread slowly, carried by traders, whispered in colony docks, told in classrooms on distant moons. People said it reminded them that connection was stronger than distance, and kindness was more powerful than law. One evening, as the suns dipped below the hills, Elias stood beside Kirani, watching the horizon turn red and gold. You realize what's happening, right? He said with a quiet smile. They're following your example. She looked at him, her eyes soft and bright. Not mine, she whispered. Ours. Above them, satellites moved silently across the violet sky, recording the story that would one day be told far beyond Varine IV. The story of how one human and one Lissari proved that the heart can be stronger than fear, and that sometimes, even across the stars, love is humanity's greatest invention. Months passed, and the quiet outpost on Varine IV was no longer forgotten. What began as a lonely shelter for one man and one lost alien woman had become something more. New domes and shelters grew across the valley. Human engineers worked beside Lissari builders, shaping metal and crystal together. The red plains that had once been empty now echoed with gentle sounds of voices and laughter. They called it Haven Colony, and everyone knew how it began, with Elias and Kirani. Elias still woke early each morning to fix the solar lines, but now he was never alone. Kirani often joined him, her hands glowing faintly as she guided energy through the cables. Sometimes other colonists came to learn from her. She taught them the Lissari way of listening to the hum of matter, how to feel when a system was alive or unbalanced. The humans found it strange at first, but soon it became normal. Machines worked better when touched with patience and calm. One morning, a young engineer named Laura asked Kirani, "How do you know where to start when something is broken?" Kirani smiled and replied softly, "You start where the silence feels wrong." Elias, hearing her words, laughed gently. "She means the same thing I say. Check the power lines first." Everyone laughed, but they also listened. The two ways, human and Lissari, began to blend into something new, something that belonged to both. As Haven Colony grew, messages from other worlds arrived. Humans on Earth and colonies in distant systems sent their greetings. Some were curious, others doubtful, but many were inspired. A few even sent volunteers, scientists, traders, and explorers who wanted to see the place where a bond between species had begun. Elias often joked that he had accidentally started an experiment bigger than he could ever fix. One afternoon, a message came from the Lissari Council. The transmission was calm and formal. It read, "To Kirani of the 9th Line, and to the human named Elias Grant. Your bond and work have brought peace where silence once lived. We wish to send a delegation to witness this harmony." When Kirani read the message, she looked both proud and nervous. "They will come," she said quietly. "My people will see with their own eyes." Elias smiled. "Then let them come. We've got nothing to hide." 3 weeks later, a graceful silver ship descended through the violet clouds and landed near the main dome. The Lissari delegation stepped out, 3 elders dressed in soft, glowing robes. Behind them walked a group of human envoys, representatives from the Intercolony Council. For the first time, humans and Lissari stood together on the same soil, not as strangers, but as guests in a shared home. Kirani greeted the elders with quiet respect. She introduced them to the colonists, showing how humans and Lissari worked side by side. She showed the greenhouses where plants from two worlds grew together. The elders moved slowly, watching, listening, their faces calm but thoughtful. Later, inside the meeting dome, one of the elders spoke. His voice was low and smooth, carrying years of wisdom. "Kirani," he said, "your choice once divided our people. Yet now it shows a path we could not see before. The human heart and the Lesari spirit, each fills what the other lacks." Elias stood beside her, listening. He wasn't used to speeches. He only said, "We didn't plan this. We just tried to survive. The rest happened because we cared." The elder looked at him and smiled faintly. That is how peace begins. For the next few days, the delegates stayed in Upsi. Fed. They saw humans and Lesari children play together in the dust, building small figures from stone and light. They saw the workshops where mixed teams designed machines that moved with both metal and crystal power. They even joined in a small evening gathering where colonists sang songs from both worlds, some with words, some with soft humming. Kirani sang that night too. Her voice was clear and beautiful, filled with a quiet strength that touched everyone listening. Elias watched her, feeling proud and grateful. The woman who had once stood trembling at his door now stood at the center of a growing world, her song reaching the stars. When the visitors prepared to leave, the Lesari elder placed his hand over his chest and said to Kirani,
"You gave up your lineage, but you built a new one here."
"The council will honor Haven as a free place for all who seek peace." Then he turned to Elias. "And you humans showed us that courage is not only in battle, but in kindness." Elias smiled quietly. "Kindness built this place," he said. "We just gave it room to grow." After they left, the colony celebrated under the twin moons. Lights flickered across the valley and laughter filled the night. Elias stood beside Kirani, watching the people dance. "You did it," he said softly. "You made them see." She looked up at him and whispered, "No, Elias, we made them believe." As the music echoed, a small breeze passed through the valley, carrying the scent of the new plants blooming near the domes. Above them, the stars shone brighter, as if the universe itself was watching. In the days that followed, Haven became more than a colony. It became a symbol. Humans and Lesari across the stars began to speak of the place where compassion built a bridge no war or fear had ever managed to build. And though messages came from every corner of space, Elias and Kirani stayed the same, working together each morning, sharing tea in the evenings, and building something that would last longer than any machine. Far away, deep sensors on other planets began to record a growing network of small cooperative outposts following Haven's model. Slowly, quietly, humanity and the Lesari were beginning to change the galaxy, not through power, but through the simple, stubborn act of understanding. And on Vereen 4, where the red sands once whispered only of emptiness, two figures stood hand in hand under the twin suns, proof that even in the cold universe, warmth can grow where hearts decide it should. Years passed quietly on the red plains of Vereen 4. The once lonely outpost had become a living world of soft light and gentle sound. Haven Colony had grown beyond anything Elias or Kirani had imagined. Where metal once stood alone, gardens now stretched under glass domes. Streams of recycled water ran between rows of green plants. The hum of generators mixed with the laughter of children, some human, some Lesari, some both. Elias grew older, his hair touched with silver, but his eyes still held the same calm strength. He worked less now, spending more time teaching the younger engineers who came from far worlds. They called him Builder, a title he never asked for. He always laughed and said, "I only fixed what was broken." Kirani still moved with quiet grace, her silver skin glowing faintly in the warm light. She had become a guide for those who came from the Lesari worlds, curious souls who wanted to understand humans better. She taught them that strength did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered in the act of kindness. At dusk, when the twin suns lowered, Elias and Kirani often sat outside their small home on the ridge, watching the light fade across the valley. From there, they could see the entire colony glowing like a necklace of tiny stars. The sight always filled them with peace. One evening, as they shared tea, a young boy from the colony ran up to them, carrying a small device. "Elias, Kirani," he called. "The relay picked up a message from Earth." Elias smiled and took the device. The boy waited eagerly as the message played. It was from the Human Council, their tone warm and respectful. To Haven Colony, Humanity thanks you. Your home has become the first shared world of peace. We invite your voices to speak at the Galactic Assembly. Elias looked at Kirani. They want us to speak, she smiled softly. Then the stars are listening again. Traveling to the assembly meant leaving Vereen 4 for the first time in many years. The colony gathered to see them off. Children waved small banners made from woven light strands, and the air was filled with cheers. Elias felt a mix of pride and sadness. I never thought leaving would feel like this, he said. Kirani touched his hand gently. Every journey begins when you are ready to share what you've learned. The ship rose slowly, leaving behind a swirl of dust and the shimmering roofs of Haven. Through the window, Elias watched the world grow smaller, until it became just a glowing dot among the stars. The journey was long but peaceful. When they arrived at the assembly station, a vast ring floating above a blue planet, they were greeted by beings from dozens of worlds. Humans stood beside Lissari, Solari, and others whose forms shimmered like smoke or crystal. It was the first time so many species had gathered in peace. Inside the great hall, Elias felt small but calm. When it was their turn to speak, he stood beside Kirani and looked out at the silent crowd. He didn't use grand words. He spoke simply, the way he always did. We built Haven because we were alone, he said. And in that loneliness, we found each other. We didn't plan to change anything. We just tried to live with kindness. Maybe that's what all of us need, to stop asking what separates us and start building what connects us. Kirani stepped forward beside him. Her voice carried a gentle melody that echoed through the chamber. Where there is fear, plant understanding. Where there is silence, share a voice. If one human and one Lissari can learn to live as one, imagine what all of us could do together. For a long moment, there was only stillness. Then slowly, the hall filled with soft applause, first from the humans, then from the Lissari, and soon from every species in the room. The sound rose like wind through the stars. After the assembly, messages flooded every communication line. Colonies requested guidance, scholars wrote about the Haven model, and families from distant worlds volunteered to join mixed communities. The idea that had begun with one simple act of compassion spread across space like light through darkness. When Elias and Kirani returned to Vereen 4, the colony had grown even more. New domes shimmered under the suns, and the children ran to greet them. One of the young girls, with blue-silver eyes and dark human hair, looked up at them and asked, "Is it true everyone wants to be like Haven now?" Kirani smiled and bent down to her. "They do not want to be like us," she said softly. "They want to remember who they are, kind and brave." That night, Elias and Kirani sat once more on the ridge. The valley glowed below, filled with soft lights. "You know," Elias said quietly, "when you first came to my door, I thought the universe had ended for me." Kirani looked at him with gentle eyes. "And I thought mine had too. But maybe endings are only doors waiting to open." He smiled. "You were the one who knocked." She laughed softly, her voice blending with the warm evening air. They sat together in silence, watching the stars rise, thousands of them shining across the endless sky. Somewhere far above, satellites carried their story from world to world. People who had never met them still spoke their names, telling children how one man and one woman from different stars taught the galaxy that peace was not a dream, but a choice made every day. As the night deepened, Kirani leaned her head on Elias's shoulder. "Do you think they'll remember us?" she whispered. He looked at the sky, smiling faintly. "Maybe not us, but they'll remember what we built." The twin moons rose higher, silver and calm, casting their light over the valley of Haven. Wind moved softly through the tall grass, carrying the quiet hum of life. In that sound was the proof of everything they had lived for, that even in the vast and silent universe, warmth could bloom from two hearts that refused to give up on each other. And long after they were gone, long after the stars themselves changed, the story of Haven lived on, of the human who stayed behind, and the alien who chose him not out of need but out of faith. Together they had turned loneliness into light, and that light continued to guide all who wandered the endless night.